Hey, Razzball Nation, back with another fantasy basketball podcast. We got the whole main crew here together for you for a second week in a row, so that in itself is a victory. We're going to keep trying to come at you every week just like this. So let's start with the introductions. I'm Brent, and to my left, my imaginary left, his son, our fearless leader. Son, take a bow.
Hello, gentlemen. Pleasure to always talk with you about hoops again.
That's for sure. And then to Son's left is Viz. How you doing, Viz?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back as well, and ready to get talking about Suns rankings and everything else that's gone on in the last week or so.
Yeah, it seems like every week there's a lot to talk about, which makes it more fun to do these podcasts every week. And then we have Craig from across the pond, making Britain great again for everybody. The Donald Trump of Britain. That's our Craig.
Yeah, no, I'm doing well. I can't complain. I suppose when I do complain, like Kevin Love, no one listens.
Well, hopefully your value is skyrocketing just like Kevin Love's this offseason. So we want to start off last week in the last podcast. If you didn't listen to it, stop it right now. Go back, listen to the other podcast so you can get our breakdown of Suns top 10. This week, we're going to go 11 through 25, and we're going to comment on it, give our thoughts on it. There should be some furious debates, I'm sure. And then we're going to move into talking about some of our overvalued, undervalued, sleepers, busts, however you want to phrase it, just guys you should look for in your draft, or maybe guys you should avoid. And if you're auto drafting on Yahoo, just move them over to the do not draft box. Then we're just going to kind of do some of the news stories that are out there right now for you to wrap it up. So starting off, Son, you want to just kind of start listing off your 11 through 25, which is up on Razzball. I think your top 50 got posted today. So up to top 50 posted on there. But we'll go through 11 to 25, and we'll just kind of jump in and comment on it.
Okay. What I should have done the last pod was trying to give a window into my process in terms of, doing the rankings. So, basically I just went through each team and just allocated the 240 minute per game pie. So in terms of a lot of my subjectivity, it's kind of baked into those projections. Kind of boils down to basically how many minutes I give, per game for each player. So then from there, I think, one thing that I'll always struggle with was, how to incorporate, field goal percentage and free throw percentage, and especially weighting it for volume. So that's one thing I wanted to try to do this year. So my, field goal percentage, free throw percentage, I tried to weight it for volume. And then, so basically each category, I just calculated the Z-score, and then, for each category, and then added them all up. And that kind of gives a overall number, which, is basically the rankings. And so I think one thing that I need to say in terms of the rankings, it's they're basically in a vacuum, right? Like my subjectivity is baked into there, but it doesn't factor in, things like ADP, things of that nature. So, that's something that you have to be cognizant if you do look at them. So, like, for example, like some guys might be high in my rankings, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should draft them there, right? So, that just means that, like, if you see the ADP of one player much lower, then that just kind of indicates that, I think that he's a great value. So, just keep that in mind, when your drafts do come up. So, with that said,
wait, Son, I am disappointed that you gave us that detail, because I was picturing a bunch of monkeys in a room on speed with darts, just throwing them at players' names on the wall to come up with the rankings. I'm disappointed to hear that you used a sophisticated method. Is somebody moving too? Or
Does it hurt?
I don't know what's going on, dude.
Hey, those are my monkeys.
The monkeys are loose. Yeah. And also to clarify, when Son says that he does his rankings in a vacuum, he means he actually does them from space. So keep that in mind when you're reading these. Give him some props.
Yeah. I mean, I am in LA, so Elon Musk, he's always hanging around here. So
You never know when you might actually get on a rocket.
he gave me a ride. But anyways, the top 25. So 11, I had Oladipo, Russell Westbrook at 12, Irving at 13, Paul George 14, Jimmy Butler 15. And I think this is where it starts to get a little interesting. I know Craig kind of mentioned these two guys out. So at 16 is Kevin Love, 17 Marcus Gasol, 18 Embiid, 19 Capella, 20 Gobert, 21 Otto Porter, 22 Lowry, 23 Middleton, 24 Drew Holiday, and 25 Kemba. So let me hear it, guys.
I think Craig should probably jump in first here. I know he had some comments, especially on the Porter Beal ranking.
Okay, well, the two things that sort of stood out for me when I was reading through the article last week when it came out was Kevin Love at 16 felt, was it 16 you had him or 17? It was one of them.
Yeah, 16.
That felt really aggressive. I mean, Kevin Love for me is kind of ready to film the sequel for White Men Can't Jump. I understand the sort of the optimism there. He put up all the stats in Minnesota when he was the guy. No LeBron, no Kyrie. I get all of that. But I still feel that he's not the player now that he was at Minnesota. He is much more of a perimeter offense guy now. I know that obviously he did shoot the 3-ball in Minnesota as well. I think Sexton is going to have a lot to say in terms of the amount of shots that Kevin Love's going to have. And I really struggle to, for me, draft a stretch 4 with very little athleticism in the first couple of rounds of a draft for me. So that one kind of stood out.
Okay, can I? Let me address that. I totally understand where you're coming from, and the Sexton aspect of it, definitely could change things, right? But the way I see it is that I do think that he does go back to Minnesota days. Now, he's older, obviously, so the explosiveness will not be the same. But I think he's gonna play in the post more. And that's pretty much where where everything is predicated upon. I remember last year, playing with LeBron, he was a stretch 4, right? That just makes the most sense. But there were times when LeBron was off the floor or the Cavs ran, he was running the offense and everything was running through him. And he was down in the post a lot. And especially down in, in the playoffs, he was getting busy down there. So I do think that, my numbers are predicated on the fact that he is going to play in the post more. His usage is gonna skyrocket, and because of that, I had to bump up everything. Last year with LeBron and not even playing a full load, and Basketball Monster, he ended up the number 26 overall player. So if I give him slight boost, and I think that he does get the usage, and I think the way that he's utilized, I don't think that 16. It might be a ceiling outcome, but I think it's definitely within the range of range of possibilities.
Going back to the sort of the defensive end kind of thing, sort of you said you expect a bit more of the Minnesota kind of Kevin Love. Do you not think? I mean, we're not going to see the Kevin Love of the days when he was pulling down 15, 16 rebounds a game, day and night and night. I think for me, a guy like guys like Tristan Thompson, even Ante Zizic, just going to hinder that, at least cap the ceiling on the rebounding numbers. We know the athleticism there for the blocks. So again, it does boil down to the offensive end, and it is for me, for Kevin Love to really get that kind of value, it is going to come down to the 3-point shot as much as it is, and obviously the offense going through him. I can obviously see the uptick in the assists. I can see the uptick in the offensive categories. For me, it just felt like a stretch for me. Even
I agree. I hear you. I actually had his rebounds higher, and Diz actually made that exact same point. So I brought his rebound numbers down. But I mean, if I'm just going through the numbers here, okay, so from a big man, you're getting 1.8 threes per game. I have him at 22.7 points, 10.5 boards. I forgot how many double doubles he had, but he was top 10 in double doubles last year, I believe. 4 assists from a big man. Granted, the D-stands aren't going to be there, so that's that definitely limits his upside. But I mean, 22, 10, and 4 with, a shade under 2 threes. Like, that's pretty good.
Sure.
Right. Where would you have him? Like down in the 20s?
Yeah, I think so.
20?
I think for me, in my preliminary rankings, I think I've got him at 29.
Okay.
And I kind of
That's fair.
wanted him more in the 30s.
Yeah.
I'd at least probably take Gasol or Embiid over him just because of the center qualification and the blocks. But I understand. Love the volume of free throws that he does. He can really help you in those percentage categories, in the turnovers. Very low on the turnovers for a guy who's going to be touching the ball a lot. So I could definitely see the wanting to take him that high. When I look at some of the names below him, they excite me a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, no, the big thing for me, and he averaged 28 minutes a game last year, right? I have him at 34, so that right there, right? That's huge.
Yeah.
Just the straight minutes played, not even incorporating the usage bumps. So maybe the 34 maybe a little bit too optimistic, possibly, but he's still only 29 years old, right? So. Yeah, like I said, it may be more ceiling outcome. So maybe splitting the difference between 16 and 29, where Craig has them, that may be the sweet spot. Somewhere maybe in the mid 20s. But like I said, my process in all of this was to try to eliminate as much subjectivity as I could. So my subjectivity is based, baked into my minutes per game projections. And then I just enter in the numbers, and then boom, whatever comes out, that's what comes out. So, there's definitely a lot of guys that, are, I was surprised where they end up. And actually, I think I had Love higher because I had his rebounds higher, and kind of, Viz kind of smacked some objectivity, into things. So I kind of brought that down a little bit, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting case, see how, the Cavs utilize them and things like that, and like you said, what impact Sexton is going to have. So
yeah, well, coming from me, I'm 100% subjective when I'm doing these for the most part, so keep that in mind. But Craig, did you have one you want to jump in with? I was going to mention Kyle Lowry.
Go for it. You go first.
Did we lose Viz?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I think I would put Love somewhere in the middle there. I think I would probably pass on him in the second round. The one pairing that somewhat interests me with Love is Giannis, only because he can make up the poor defensive stats that Love has. I generally don't like digging myself in that hole where I have to start chasing steals and blocks right away, which Love makes you do. But Giannis should be at a steal and a half, a block and a half, and you'd still be in decent shape, in both those categories if you have Love. Now you have Love making up a bit of Giannis's slightly negative free throw percentage and threes, and you get 4 to 5 assists from each of them to make up for that. So I wouldn't mind that pairing. Otherwise, I'm probably holding off until the beginning of the third round for Love.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
So Viz holding out for Love is what we learned here. And the only time you're going to hear the love making as a combination said in this podcast. So I had Kyle Lowry. I was looking at 22, and I was, I understand why he's ranked there. I was just curious what you guys thought the impact of losing DeRozan. And is Leonard going to negatively impact Lowry, or is he going to help bump up Lowry's point guard stats a little bit more? He's obviously not going to have to score. DeRozan canceled out just the same, I think, as far as scoring goes. But how do you think Leonard being there affects his, point guard stats?
Well, I think the efficiency from Leonard and the fact that Leonard can do the damage with a lower usage rate than DeRozan has got to point towards a sort of positive trend for Kyle Lowry for me. I mean, the issue I always have with Kyle Lowry is not the talent when it comes to fantasy basketball, and it's not what he can do. It is literally how many games he's going to play in the season, and more importantly, how many he's going to be playing in the playoffs. come your fantasy playoffs. I mean, now I don't necessarily think that Leonard coming in is going to negatively impact Lowry in terms of what he can do on the court. I'm just avoiding Lowry from the sense that I don't trust the health second half of the season. But from a statistical standpoint and a projection standpoint, I've got no issues with that ranking at all. I think you could possibly argue from a statistical standpoint, over 82 games, you could probably put him higher. But naturally, like I think some mentioned, you got to put a minutes and a games played in there when you're doing your projections. That might knock him down a little bit. Would that be correct, Sam?
Yeah. I mean, he was a really tough one for me. He played 78 games last year, but the year before that 60. But then he was like 77, 70, 79, 68. So, the main thing for me was, the Raptors are tough for me because of my my negative bias towards Kawhi, and that just totally just shifts everything for me, right? Because if I think Kawhi, is going to be the man, like he's top 3, top 5 player, right? So that just really just changes the whole dynamic of the team and just everybody's usage rate. So it was very tough for me. So I kind of hedged my bets here a little bit. I think, I just kind of went in the middle, here. Like
you've got the coaching change as well, haven't you? You got Nick Nurse there instead of Dwayne Casey, so it's going to be. I'm a big fan of Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse was the head coach of my local team here, Brighton, when they had a team and made him one of the best teams in Europe. So I've got quite an affinity towards him, but he's quite offensive-minded. But you can't sort of rule out the fact that that's actually going to have quite an impact as well.
Yeah, for sure. More openness and, the fact that they did get rid of Poto, right? Probably give more side cam. They're going to, probably play with more smaller lineups, right? And so that's going to, be a positive thing, I think, for Lowry and maybe Kawhi. I don't know. Like I said, everything comes out to Kawhi for me. So
that was where I was going to go with the two because, I talked about last time how I really liked this team, and I'm assuming he's going to play with Danny Green and OG a lot. Those are 2 low usage guys, and even if Kawhi sucks up a fair amount of volume, it probably doesn't even reach DeRozan's usage. So now you have a lot of extra usage for Lowry. He only averaged 16 points last year after being 21 and 22 the 2 years before. Granted, he's not going to play 37 minutes again. Again, the injury risk, I understand, keeps him down, but I'm perfectly fine with Lowry being in the top 25 and being a late second-round pick.
Yeah, this is one of the rare years of the last few years that I'd be comfortable actually having Lowry as my guard. I think the potential's there, but yeah, I do try to avoid injury guys. Like most guys who are pretty good at fantasy basketball tend to avoid the injury guys and rarely take gambles.
He's been a 1.5 steal guy or higher for 4 years, and last year he was down at 1.1. Like, is now because he's older, is he a 1.1 guy, or is he going to get back to 1.5? That's a pretty big difference. That's the difference between him potentially even pushing a top 15 player, or maybe he's hurt, or his shooting stays where it was last year at 42%, and he ends up being not a bust if you take him at the end of the second round, but you probably didn't quite get as much value as you should have for that spot.
That's a good point. In terms of the injury aspect, are you not taking guys like Anthony Davis and Steph Curry because of that?
I've avoided Davis before for that, but man, his injury, Davis's injuries are so freak though. You feel like there's going to be a season where he doesn't spin around and hit the cheerleader in the head and break his thumb, kind of season, or slip on a towel or whatever actually happened. But
in terms of Lowry, like I said, like he played the last 5 seasons, 78, 77, 79 games. Granted, there's a 70 and a 60 in there, so yeah, that's definitely warranted. But it's not like he's playing 60 games every year,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. And what do you guys think about Chris Middleton? I could see him, pushing even up for like Kevin Love's spot on this list. Is he just held down, by having that superstar next to him?
You guys want to go, or you want me to go?
Or anyone?
Okay,
Throw
I'll
it out
go.
there
I
for
mean,
the group. Yeah.
I love Middleton. I love his game. Like, silky smooth. Shoots a high percentage, 3-pointers. He's gonna grab down boards, give you some assists. He's not gonna help you on blocks. Uh, you know, I think he's a little capped out though in terms of like scoring and things like that, just because I don't see him scoring too much more than 20 points a game. Giannis is going to suck up everything. And then now you got guys like, Brook Lopez and, other guys that can shoot on that team, Ilyasova. So, is he ever going to be the guy and have that huge usage rate to, catapult him to like the 25, 30-point range? I don't think so, but he's really, really solid and he's going to contribute in everything except for blocks, which is, very valuable.
Yeah, he's not going to hurt you. Let me go around the group here. I had a thought while I was looking at these. Is there one, if you could exclude one guy from this list, so one guy on this top 11 to 25 that you just would not draft, which guy would that be? Craig?
Relative to the spots where Sun put them, I have a hard time putting Otto Porter Jr. at 22 or drafting in the top 25. I get it in terms of, still young, but a lot of where the value really comes with Otto Porter Jr., but, he's a guy that shot 50% from the field last year, which is very impressive, especially bearing in mind he had 4.1 three-point attempts per game. But I kind of feel that so much of that value is tied in with his efficiency and low turnover rate that what he does well, I kind of feel I can get quite cheaply later on in drafts easier. Now, for me, in the exact same spot that Sun has Otto Porter Jr., I got Bradley Beal. And for me, I have a hard time not having Bradley Beal over Otto Porter Jr. because, the extra assists. Bradley Beal, he actually got more 3 points last year at 0.6 a game more. Most things are relatively comparable, but I can get a good field goal percentage out of Bill with more points rather than the 50% efficiency from Otto Porter Jr. So I understand there's more turnovers with Bill. The field goal percentage is a little bit of a knock. But, Bradley Beal put up, 46% last year, or 48, something like that, while still scoring 22.6 points a game whilst attempting 6.5 threes. So for me, just getting those extra assists, I think that when John Wall's out, injured, Bill then suddenly becomes the guy. Bradley Beal for me is a guy that's, pushing top 20. So for me, if I was going to exclude someone other than Kevin Love, it would be Otto Porter Jr.
Porter Jr. is like the money ball guy of the list, right, son? The pure statistic guy.
The metric scorer. He's the metric scorer, right? A lot of his value is field goal percentage and turnovers. But he gives you nice rebounds and the D stats. And I get the Beal, having taken Beal over Otto. It's definitely close. I think it comes down to what you want. Like in terms of Beal, like when Wall was down, he actually wasn't that good as the primary creator. Like he struggled a little bit. He was actually much better when he was playing off the ball and Wall was leading the offense. So I don't know if that role particularly fits him that well. And if we're talking about injury, like we got to talk about Beal. Right? Like he played.
Oh no, I understand that.
Yeah, right.
I think another part of my argument sort of comes to a sort of question that kind of got floated up last week was if you're looking for a guy that's got that potential to jump into that kind of, from this range into that top 10 elite range. I'm not saying it will happen or I think it will happen.
Right.
But I think Bradley Beal for me is one of those guys that you've got to put into consideration. Because if I try to weigh up Bradley Beal and Otto Porter Jr., in terms of fantasy upside, I don't even think it's close. I think Bill does have that potential. He's still only 25.
True. He can jump a 50 burger. Yeah, he can jump a 50 burger on any night. Yeah, for sure.
But he has the potential to have a season where, in the next few years, where he could put up 25 points a game, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 2.5 threes, and a steal a game. You're then pushing into that top 12 kind of fantasy overall range because the efficiency, and we've got the history there to suggest that the efficiency is very good with Bradley Beal as well, in terms of his shooting. So
definitely.
Whereas
I'm in agreement.
This is the ceiling for me. I mean, obviously there's more room to, there could be more 3-point attempts and more threes made. You might get an uptick in the points, but I just don't see much more ceiling than what he did last year.
Exactly. No, he's tapped out, and I agree 100% that Beal has the higher upside. Yeah, for sure. No arguments there. It's just, Porter's just so solid. And this is one of the things when I, preface in the intro, like numbers and rankings, like even, Basketball Monster has Porter, like he ended up as a 20th player, things like that. Like numbers are just one tool, right? They're not the end all be all. Like you don't go down the list and be like, boom, right? So like in terms of, you have to factor in ADP, roster construction, things of that nature. Like Porter is not a guy that you're going to build a team around, but he's a great guy to have as a complementary piece because he's not going to hurt you in any category and he's going to contribute everywhere. And that has value. But I do agree that the upside is definitely in Beal's corner for sure.
I think your format you play too matters a lot with Porter. In a roto league, you get much more value from the guys who just churn out good numbers across the board. When you're playing a head-to-head league, like on a week-to-week basis, Porter's just not going to make as much of a difference. So, like, him and Love are obviously the two most debatable guys on this part of the list. And I think Love, it depends on your team build. We already talked about him extensively. And Porter, like, I'm a math nerd at heart. I would have a tough time taking him in the second round, which the numbers always say is that's where he's been the last couple of years. But like I said, I think in a roto league, you could talk me into it more in the earlier parts. Or in a head-to-head league, I want to build a team that crushes a lot of categories. And sure, I don't want to go in punting one, but maybe I end up punting a category and saying who cares. Where a guy like Porter, he's not going to win you a category in any week, has any chance to. He's just going to be decent enough, and that's not a guy I'm looking to take in a head-to-head league this early in the draft, I should say.
Yeah, no, totally fair, and that's like the big debate, right? That's been the conversation for the last few years. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the key things to take from this, and that I'm sort of taking from this top 25 discussion, is be open-minded and be flexible with when you're drafting, because there are a lot of good players at the top of the draft. So if you miss out on Jimmy Butler, there's Chris Middleton's coming up. There's guys that are just behind those guys and really good, and that's really when you have to pay attention to. And Viz hits on this all the time is how your draft is going. Like, did you take a center and a lot of rebound and block guys early on? Then you might not, you're not good. Maybe Otto Porter does make sense then. Or if you take somebody who gets high assists or something like that, but has high turnovers, then someone like Porter can make sense. So be really flexible with who you're taking and really pay attention to how your roster's coming together. One guy that, just on that note, the guy that I would look at would be Capella. I don't like low free throw percentage guys, and he's gotten better, but those guys still scare me away. Do you think is 62%, is that a ceiling for him, do you think, or do you think there's a chance that he improves on that a little bit? Because that would definitely help his draft stock in my book. Son?
Yeah, I mean, right now probably a ceiling, but you never know, right? They can hire, Drew Hanlon, whatever his name is. It's Hanlon, right? Drew Hanlon.
Yeah, but he's already working with 50 guys according to ESPN.
Yeah, right. So I mean, look at what Andre Drummond did. Improving his free throw percentage. So I mean, it's definitely possible. I mean, every year, he has improved, and like what was it, 17% his rookie year? Oh, he improved much, but 40%, 53, 56. So I mean, I gave him a slight, improvement just, just from experience, and hopefully, he does, spend some time in the gym and things like that. But yeah, he's probably capped out there, in the 60s. But I mean, the points, the rebounds, the blocks, and he's playing in one of the most fantasy friendly environments ever. And like I harped on this last pod, but from a macro perspective, I do believe that Houston's going to have to run and gun. They're not going to be able to grind it out, and that's only going to help him. More possessions equals more opportunities, which equals more fantasy goodies. And so, I mean, the free throws is really the only thing. I mean, he's elite in field goal percentage. Basically assist, right? Those are the only negatives that he's at: free throw percentage and assists. So everything else, he's like really, really good. So, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on him.
Well, I pretty much agree with just about everything that you said. I mean, the one thing I really struggle to hold stock in free throw percentage as a stat that can be improved. Like we saw the significant jump from Drummond last year. I'm not completely buying that just yet, if that makes sense.
No.
But when I draft a player, I never, whereas we can project improvements in lots of areas, whether it's assists or, we get the signs from, are they going to be more of a ball handler? Are they going to play off the ball, et cetera, different categories. I'm never one to buy into, well, I think the free throw percentage could improve. There are things, obviously, shooting form and things like that we look into. But for me personally, for my preference, I always tend to try and, on the free throw percentage, look at it from more of a pessimistic point of view, especially from poor free throw shooters, even if they've had an outlier season.
Viz, what are your thoughts on Capella?
I mean, I don't think losing the guys they did on the wing and replace them with Melo, I don't think it affects Capella at all, honestly. He's going to be a rim roller. Houston's going to have 4 guys out. He's going to score the same amount, basically, unless he improves at the rim, but I find it hard to believe. He's going to be who he is. I mean, he's a very good player in real life. I was surprised he actually signed that extension. I think Houston got a very good deal on that. Where Sun has him 19th, you'd be looking at in a 12-man league. That's right around where the Towns, Jokic area. You're probably not going to take him there just because you don't want to open up center. So, maybe the guys like Lowry and Drew would slide up to that spot and maybe lower. But, I mean, that's nitpicking. I like Capella and Gobert plenty. I mean, deciding between the two of them, I like Gobert more, but he's missed significant time too the last 3 years. So I completely understand having Capella ahead of him. And, you just know at that point, if you end up with Capella or Gobert, you have a lot to make up in assists. And, it's hard to say, Gobert has improved his free throw percentage by about 5% every year that he's been in the league. Now he's at 68. Do I think he's going to shoot 73 this year? No, probably not. Can he get to 70? I think so, and that's not as big of a detriment. Can Capella get to 62 where Sun has him? I think so. And, you just have to be cognizant of what you're doing and adjust accordingly. You decide you're just going to straight out punt free throws if you end up getting, say you're in a deeper league and you take LeBron and then you end up with Capella. Well, you already know your free throw percentage is in the tank, then you draft from there accordingly. If you end up taking someone else, then you don't do that and adjust. It comes back to that at the end of the day.
So let me interject real quick. I'm sorry. Yeah,
you're fine.
Yeah, the percentages that I have, keep in mind that they're adjusted. They're adjusted for volume, right? So the free throw percentage I have projected for is actually 55%. But because the impact that he has, he's a low volume shooter, so the impact actually it actually gives him an increase because he doesn't, he's not a high volume, shooter. So in that context, you're basically looking at a 62% free throw shooter. You know what I'm saying? So
unless teams go to the hack a cap. Or slap a cap. Unless teams go to the hack a cap or slap a cap. Slap a cap?
Yeah, it seems like that's happening less and less now, thankfully. Yeah. I mean, I understand not wanting to change the rules for it, but it's just so tough to watch. Like, DeAndre Jordan shoot 20 free throws a few times when they played the Spurs, and just not good for
Ben
television
Simmons
ratings
last
at the
year.
least.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to be at the frequency that it was 4 or 5 years ago.
It's almost like with these, with I don't know, maybe the top 25, maybe even the top 50 to some extent. Like you almost don't want to put numbers next to their name just because it's so draft dependent or so individual dependent
honestly,
based on your league, based on how your draft is going.
Yeah, I mean, for my hockey projections, I don't even put any numbers next to the guys' names. If people ask me, I'll give them what I think. I'll put some ranges down in the notes, but I don't put exact numbers because I just don't want to pigeonhole these guys. I don't. It serves some purpose for sure, but I don't need people to. Oh, maybe you have these numbers for these guys. They should be flip flopped. Whatever. I don't think it's worth the headache.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
You said it's all relative as well, isn't it? I mean, there are so many guys. Like let's take DeMar DeRozan for example. His value to your team is so dependent on who you've drafted before him because he can, he could be your get out of jail free card with the high volume, excellent free throw percentage, or he can almost be, redundant because he's not going to offer you what you need. There's so much of that about that. Like Viz says, it's all about roster construction. It's very dependent on how much a player's value is to your team.
That's why it's so important to not just read Suns rankings, but to listen to our podcast where we break it down for you, so so you know exactly how to draft. So just in the interest of time, something that we kind of even touched on a little bit already, and one of the most fun discussions in the off season and leading up to drafts are, which players would we consider quote unquote sleepers? Guys that we, should outperform where they might be drafted, or guys you may not be thinking of because they were hurt last year or because they're young and they haven't broke out yet, sort of like a Josh Richardson coming into his third year whose son loved and totally called it. And anybody who kind of might be a bust, like is Kevin Love going to be a bust up where he's going to be drafted, or like Marc Gasol, is he never going to get back to where he was? So I just want to go around the room and get some sleeper busts, I guess we can just call them for the sake of argument, or however you want to look at it, that you guys are thinking. And let's start over in England this time with Craig. Who are you thinking might be a sleeper, might be a bust coming into this year?
Okay, well, 3 guys that I'm going to be aggressively targeting in my drafts this year. I'll go as quick as I can. First one will be Malik Monk, fantastically talented player, really undersized last year, so it's no surprise it didn't. It took him nearly the whole of the season to get going. The final 5 games of the season, he got 24.4 minutes, just over 20 points per game on 48% field goal percentage, didn't miss a free throw. That was with 3.8 threes a game, 4 assists, and nearly a steal and a block. Now, with Malik Monk, it was all about, he's got fantastic athleticism, actually a really good shooter of the ball, despite what his field goal percentage might have looked like overall last year. It was all about the confidence in the contact. He was very undersized, played in like a 3-guard system at Kentucky with Isaiah Briscoe and De'Aaron Fox. But this is a real phenomenal talent. I think he showed at the end of last season he's now ready to make that next step, and I think that there's going to be plenty of opportunity in Charlotte this year, especially if we see Kemba moving at some point. So Malik Monk is a guy that I fully expect to break out, and I think that in the next few years, I think the upside there is fantasy upside and real life upside is very, very high. Second guy I got is Jonathan Isaac, 20-year-old out of Orlando. Seems to be a bit of a buzz guy at the moment because of the fantastic summer league that he had. But, like Viz was saying about Kevin Love, if you miss out on, someone that's going to provide high defensive stats early in your draft, take a look at Jonathan Isaac. I mean, his per 36 numbers last year, he had 2 blocks, 2.2 steals, and just over a 3 a game on per 36. In summer league, he averaged 27, 2.7 blocks a game. This is a guy that will really impact the floor on the defensive end. The offense is still a bit of a work in progress, but one of the things in summer league that really got people excited was how much better he was at his self-creation off the dribble. His jump shot looked no end better to where it did last year. And let's not forget, he was one of the most raw players at the top end of the draft last year. So, that's the guy that if he can get 25, 26 minutes this season a game, he will make a big impact because of the scarce cats that he'll provide in.
He was definitely on the per 36 All-Star team last year.
And the third guy I got is Harry Giles. I keep getting his name wrong. I want to call him Harry Styles or Barry Giles. But no, Harry Styles, I was going to say it again. Harry Giles. I mean, this is a high school phenom. Guy, buddy of mine, Steve Connell, has been on at me for a couple of years, ever since he was at high school. Didn't work out at Duke. The two big knee injuries that he had at high school. But he looks a little rusty in summer league, but he looked great in place as well. You talk about guys that have got that real combination that you want of length, athleticism, can run the floor, excellent in transition, great pass with the ball for a guy his size as well. I think there's lots of potential there. It's all going to come down to how much they ease him in, and obviously they've got a deep front court. I say deep, they got a lot of guys who play power forward and center in Sacramento. So for me, there's my three guys.
Yeah, it's always nice to see a guy named Harry succeeding. I don't know what it is. It gives me a good feeling. But and I'm with you. I always call him Harry Styles too. Viz, how about you?
So it's tough because I want to mention Jared Allen and John Collins, but at the same time they're so trendy, and I mean Son has them both in his top 50, and I feel like that's probably right in all honesty. So I'm going to look at Mitchell Robinson, actually, and I think his role is going to grow as the season goes on. He stood out to me in Summer League, and what he could do defensively already was just phenomenal. He made one of the craziest plays I've seen where he closed out to a guy on one side. They swung the ball to the other corner, and he managed to go the 50 feet across the court and block the corner three, and it was just mind-boggling to me. And I feel like Fizdale is just going to grow sick of Cantor's defense, and they're going to have no one else to turn to. The team is rebuilding anyway. Without Porzingis, they're going to be bad. And I feel like Robinson has a chance to put up the numbers that we're kind of expecting from Jordan Bell, probably without the assists, though. But I'm talking big rebounding and very good steals and blocks where you're not going to have to draft him as high as Bell is, and you also don't have to risk Bell's minutes are going to go down, I think, as the season goes along when Cousins comes back, albeit slightly. Robinson's minutes are probably going to increase. It's a late-round flyer, but he's a guy I think could actually make a fairly big difference if you're short on defensive stats. As far as another guy I think is going to probably be undervalued is Ricky Rubio. And I know this is some slight bias here, but this is going to be his 8th season in the league, and it'll be the first time that he's going to be in the same system 2 years in a row. And he finished off the end of last season, the second half, averaging about 16, 5, and 6 with those great steals. And his field goal percentage was 42, 43%, which isn't bad from where he's been in the past. Add in a good free throw percentage. And I think Rubio in that third tier of point guards is going to be a pretty decent value.
Fizz, can I ask you just about Mitchell Robinson? I agree with everything that you said, but in an article about 9 months ago, I wrote that this was the closest thing that I'd seen to DeAndre Jordan since DeAndre Jordan, and I hate player comps for the sake of player comps, unless it really stands out, which is what a buddy of mine said to me the other day, and it really stuck. But do you see that? Do you see the DeAndre Jordan mark too?
I could definitely see that too. I mean, his free throws were bad in Summer League. Granted, it was a very small sample. I don't think he's going to be as bad as Jordan was in the beginning, but it's definitely a downside. And I guess on a punt free throw team, Robinson's an even better target. But yeah, I definitely could see that. The steals might even be a little bit better than Jordan's are, at least to start. But
it's just that kind of the way that will create. You're not going to build an offense around him, and you're certainly not going to create a bunch of plays. But he's going to get his scraps, he's going to get his lobs, and he's going to work hard low, and the athleticism's there. Every time I see him, the last year. It's just, which admittedly, he sat out, but all the stuff in high school and what have you,
right?
It just reeked of DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, it seemed like he had such a point to prove in summer league. Like he was such a highly regarded player and just didn't play last year. And I know because Son sent me his original projections, and Robinson was in his top 100. Now I don't know if I would. You're not going to have to take him that high, which is a good thing. But I could end up. It wouldn't shock me if he ended up giving you top 100 value at the end of the season. Granted, like I said, it's going to have to be in certain builds.
And it's a perfect complement to Cantor as well, really, because Cantor's not really, apart from the fact that they play the same position, he's not really
they're almost at opposites.
But he's going to give them a flexibility in terms of rotations, isn't he? That Cantor doesn't. So I agree.
Absolutely.
They're not going to have much reason not to play him.
Exactly.
Young guys, don't we, that can create value out of 20 minutes a game, like Joe Allen and John Collins did. Mitchell Robinson's going to be a classic example of that, because he'll have games where he'll put up 3 or 4 blocks in, 15 minutes at times. Not every 15 minutes. He'll be thereabouts, I think.
I don't even see Porzingis really playing that much this year, so that's going to open up more minutes for him as well.
Yeah, he's targeting Christmas at the earliest, and I think that's pushing it.
Very, very aggressive.
I would be shocked if he was back before February, and if it ends up going even longer into March, at that point, is it even worth it to bother?
Why are you playing him?
The Knicks have enough to look forward to next season, and the fans have enough to talk about with the free agents they're going to go after, that I think they can tank and get away with it this year.
Yeah, agreed.
So I'm going to jump in with mine really quick because I want Son to cap it off for us. And I'm going to go deep with some of mine, maybe your last pick or your second to last pick kind of guys. Because I'm always, it gets down to the end of the draft, and you get that kind of pressure. You don't want to have to, go on the waiver wire right away. You want to snag a guy and look like a genius at the end. So I'm always trying to think of these guys. I'm usually not right. I'm usually replacing them with a waiver wire guy, but I like to try anyway. I think a couple guys like that. One would be Karis LeVert on the Nets. I was reading an article about, and I had already had him on this list before I saw this article, by the way, but that the 2 guys on the Nets who are spending the most time in the gym are LeVert and Jarrett Allen. And Jarrett Allen, we obviously know the hype around him coming into the season. I think it's well deserved. But I think LeVert could end up getting a chance to play quite a bit. He plays both guard spots. They like to play small. And he's capable of getting 20 to 30 points in a game at times. One of those kind of firecracker guys off the bench. Another guy I really like towards the end of drafts is Zach Collins. He might end up kind of getting overdraft just because of the hype and the name, but they said he's bulked up a little bit. He's not getting pushed around quite as much, that he can hang down on the block, and that was a big reason they were comfortable letting Ed Davis go in Portland. So I do think that he has a chance to kind of step up. He's that perfect kind of new age sort of stretch four player. And then finally, real deep, I like, I was torn between a couple guys, but I was going to say Alex Len as your last pick. I think he's going to get a chance in Atlanta. They have some big guys already, but when he was healthy and playing, if you get down to the end of the draft, you need blocks and boards. He's definitely someone to keep an eye on. So I like those 3 guys. There's a bunch of sleeper guys, but this year.
Yeah, I mean, quick, just before someone gets going, someone on Atlanta has to score. They're going to score 90 points a game at least. Teams in the NBA don't score less. So whether it's Collins, Taurean Prince, Young, if Bazemore is still there, somebody is going to overperform their value, and probably by a large margin. Figuring out who that's going to be is the tough part, because one of the guys I was originally looking at was Prince, but he doesn't give you too much for the D stats, or he's okay rebounder, but it's nothing that great. But his usage is going to jump up, and he's probably going to score a lot. So maybe it's him. But somebody on Atlanta is going to do it. I don't know if Craig or Son, besides Collins, anyone else that you like.
Do you not think it could go the other way for Taurean Prince? I mean, I'm a massive Taurean Prince fan as a real life basketball perspective because he's available.
Oh, I agree.
But I think they specifically went into the draft to add firepower, and they got 3 guys in Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, and Amari Spellman, which is basically firepower. And I think that that could actually hurt from an offensive point of view Taurean Prince's value, and he'll be more reliant just more on his D, to be honest. That's how I see it.
Sure. That's what I was saying when you sent out the list of stuff, and I was looking at him as one of my sleepers, but the more I looked at it, it made me a bit nervous. Like, I was encouraged. He shot 39% from 3 last year on decent volume, but like you said, I just don't see the usage going up like I would have thought a few months ago.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. No, his usage is gonna tank. Trae Young is gonna have the ball in his hands plenty, and when Lynn's on the court, he's gonna have the ball in his hands. And I'm with you. I love Collins as well. So yeah, I think Prince is gonna become a maybe like a 3-and-D type of guy because he's not gonna have the ball in his hands too much. Yeah.
Son, how about you? Any sleepers you're keeping an eye on for this year?
I think the first guy that jumped out to me was Mike Conley. Obviously, everything is predicated on health, but all signs indicate that he's good to go. So, after his 2016 season, he was really overvalued in fantasy, and then I feel like the pendulum has swung the other way, where people are gonna be quote unquote sleeping on him. That Memphis team is gonna be much improved. You're gonna have rejuvenated Gasol. I mean, I love Jaren Jackson Jr. They picked up Kyle Anderson. I mean, they're not gonna have Andrew freaking Harrison running the point and playing 32 minutes a game, right? Like, that in itself is a win, right? Wayne Selden, like, he'll get time, but he's not gonna be like the main guy. So I think the team is gonna be much improved, and from a number standpoint, I mean, he's given you 6 assists, 1 steal. He's going to score. I mean, he's going to score plenty. He's going to chip in threes. So, I feel like, obviously ADP data is not out right now and things like that, but I feel like he's going to be sliding. I think a lot of people are going to overlook him. So that's the first guy. Second guy is Podol. I like him a lot. I mean, the blocks are going to be, close to elite. And, the main thing is, it's all about opportunity, right? And San Antonio, I mean, look at their depth chart. Pau Gasol is center. He's not playing more than 22 minutes a game, 24 max, maybe, even less. Power forward Aldridge, and who's behind him? Gay and Bertans. The opportunity's there for him. And, if he does, I have him down for 23 minutes. I could see him getting more than that. And if he does, I think he's going to well exceed his ADP. Even though I don't know what it is right now, I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty low. So, and then the third guy was kind of like more of like a lottery ticket, Willie Hernangomez. I know Cody Zeller, like, they love Zeller, and, he passes the ball well for a big man, and he plays really good D. But, as with Podol, like, the depth chart in Charlotte has kind of opened up for him as well. They still have Biyombo. Honestly, I don't really see him making too much of a contribution. So, there's a sneaky chance that if, Hernangomez does get minutes, I mean, he's a, per 36 monster, right? Last year, 18 and, was it 15? Is that right? Yeah, 18 and 16, right? With 1.2 blocks, 1.4 steals. I mean, when he was on the Knicks, he was a per 36 monster too, but obviously, the main thing is his defense, right? Like, I mean, he even got lit up in summer league, so that's not a good sign. But I think there is a slight, chance that if he does get an increase in minutes, that he could really, just decimate his ADP. Or
where does the defense come in the front court if Biyombo doesn't play though?
Zeller's decent. Right, but outside of that, there's not much. Like, Marvin Williams, Kaminsky, bad. But yeah, I agree. I agree. You're not a big Seller fan, Craig?
No, not at all. I like Willie Hernan Gomez for what he does, but again, we'll go back to the white men can't jump thing here. I think Charlotte pretty much epitomizes that, doesn't it? And with their draft strategy during that period. But I don't know. I think Biombo might have some sneaky value just because I feel there are certain rotations Biombo has to play. As simple as that. Because even Zeller, I think in certain rotations isn't going to work. But again, who knows what's going to go on in Charlotte, because we've had our time figuring it out for quite a few years now.
Yeah, that's what I kind of get from the sleepers talk is that it might be good to go kind of guard heavy early in drafts, because there are a lot of kind of boards and blocks guys that could be available later on. If you want to, not, avoid a Capella in his free throw percent or something like that and go guard instead. Like, it feels like that might be easier to make up than obviously assists and steals later on, which are really tough to make up.
I think that's right. I think especially of the last few years, and the more these athletic bigs that we've had coming into the league, I think in fantasy now there's way more bigs that we can rely upon that are going to do the damage in 20 minutes. Like Jakob Pertl. I mean, he finished 12th last year in the NBA in blocks in limited minutes. 12th. That's huge, really, when you consider how few minutes he played. I mean, he was just under 20 or something like that, minutes-wise. But I think now we have all these guys that, these bigs that play 23, 24 minutes or sometimes even fewer that do impact the fantasy game because of their athleticism. It, for me, puts me off that necessity of having to draft a center or a big man in the first 3 rounds.
Look at like Kyle O'Quinn. I mean, I think he had like 5 games in a row where he had 3 blocks or something in like 15 minutes.
Okay, now you're just taking it too far for me,
Hey, I'm a KOQ fan. Like,
you're a fan.
Don't pronounce it. You have to spell it out, or it doesn't work. If you just say I'm a
the fantasy dick likes cock.
Hey, cock-a-doodle do if you get me those 3 blocks in 15 minutes. Cock-a-doodle do. So we had a few more minutes, so we hit the hour mark. And so what I wanted to end with, I wanted to go around the horn and just throw out some stories that I wrote down from the last week, just to kind of get your guys' take on them. I'm sure you've seen them as well. So I want to throw this one out to Viz. Viz, I read that Andre Drummond shooting 200 corner threes a day. Is Andre Drummond going to develop a three-point shot this season?
I mean, I find it hard to believe. I'm just so uninterested with this Pistons team. Like, they're going to probably get 8th in the East because I don't know who their competition even is for that last spot. I guess Charlotte, the Nets, I just don't even know. It's such a cesspool. But I find it hard to believe that Drummond's going to be, 2.5 threes a game is kind of a lot. I don't really know what to make of this team, but I could see them in the first couple weeks of the season. He ends up shooting at that kind of rate, and then it just tails off a bit. I'm interested to see what you guys think about it, but I'm not making too much out of it at this point.
Does anybody think there's something to this Drummond story? Or fake news?
I could throw 200 baseballs a day, and I'm not hitting 100 miles per hour. Not just that. At the same time, Dwayne Casey's got to give him the green light in an actual game and run some offense through him with him on the perimeter. I just can't see it happening.
I don't know, man. Like, I see him play. He plays down here in LA at the Drew, and like he balls out. Like he's doing the spin, step back threes. You're stepping in transition. Like he has the athleticism and the skills. And we saw that his improvement in his free throw shooting, and I see him when he step backs and he fades away. Like he has a nice stroke, and granted it's in the summer league, right, the Drew League, pro-am, type of non-competitive environment. But there are I'm with you guys. I don't think it's gonna be a realistic, viable outcome, but I'm not completely dismissing it because I've seen it. I've seen him with the ability, so what did he do last year? attempted .03. Right? Right? Like, I don't know. I could see that going up to what, maybe like half a game or something like that.
Sure. I mean, if he's taking 53s in a season or something, maybe. Like, if he starts off well and then they're willing to let him go more. But if he starts like 1 for 12, I can't imagine Casey's going to let him shoot anymore.
But as a fantasy owner, would you want him taking twice the amount of threes?
I would.
As your field goal percentage help?
Exactly.
No, yeah, like if you get him and you only have to punt free throws, that's fine. But if he gets to the point where he's shooting under 50% from the field, you're losing so much. Yeah. So I personally wouldn't want him to take any.
Hey, let me ask you guys a question. This has been on my mind the last couple of days, actually. So sorry, Brent, if I'm like kind of like.
No, go for it, man.
Here. But I mean, just talking about punting and things like that. So, I guess my question is, how many categories is too much to punt? And the reason why I bring this up is I was looking digging deeper into Ben Simmons, right? And like he's awesome, right? Like triple double threat, but like you're essentially punting 3 categories with him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, I mean.
He's an avoid for me.
I mean, we're talking 9-cat, I assume.
9-cat.
Yeah, and so I mean, in a roto league, it's different. I definitely wouldn't punt even more than 1. In a head-to-head, I could maybe see 2, depending. I mean, the thing is, you really have to punt 3s with Simmons. I know you're getting a 0, and that's tough, but I mean, it's no different than if you have a Capella or Gobert. You just have to work around it differently than otherwise. But
do you not feel with the 3s that in the day with so many stretch 4s and centers taking 3s now, I'm not that worried about getting a point guard who isn't a specialist 3-point shooter. I mean, it's not like going back sort of 7, 8, or 10 years when you worry about drafting Tony Parker because you're going to fall behind in 3s. This day and age, you talk about Kevin Love or any of the big guys that go out and drain a ton of 3s. I just find now all the 3 points that are shot now throughout all the positions, it's so easy to make up that you don't necessarily. You can almost play that positionless basketball kind of game.
Mm-hmm. Well, that'd be fine if 3s was his only problem. Was it?
Well, no, I agree. I mean, sure. Percentage is a big issue, but then. You get again in roto, it's a totally different argument. But in head-to-head, I mean, you can almost balance out that if he can learn to shoot with both hands, for example, the strength and the mismatches that he's got, and the way he can get to the line at will, that effectively the field goal percentage from a point guard position, from a point guard eligible player, could be such a positive eventually that it almost cancelled out the negative of the free throw percentage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, you're still having to punt. Even if you work around one of his deficiencies, you're still having to punt 2. It'd be hard to work around 2 of his deficiencies to just keep punting 1 category, right?
Well, I think when you talk about turnovers as well, though, you're then talking about, well, I can't draft Westbrook or I can't draft Harden because they're going to, turn the ball over too much. I think it's just it's clever roster construction, isn't it? And I think
it is.
I can never go into a draft with a certain strategy. I can't go in saying I'm going to rule out, I'm going to punt this category, I'm going to punt that category, or I'm going to go center, point guard, or whatever. Because I think that you miss out so much and you limit yourself so much later on in the draft, where your best value player just suddenly just is almost useless to you because it just doesn't fit your set strategy. Because you had this fixed mindset going in. I mean, I tend to try to go in and not punt any. If it turns out that I have to, then I go that way. But I don't want to miss out on the value, if that makes sense, or limit myself by having a fixed mindset.
Does anyone here want to draft? Is anyone here going to draft Ben Simmons?
It depends.
I'm not going to say no. I mean, he's a fun.
What if you draft Russell? What if you draft Russell Westbrook? And Ben Simmons is sitting there. Right? Isn't he the perfect guy to pair with Russ?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. But like I said, I don't want to go in and limit myself to saying, right, I'm definitely going to turn.
No, of course. Yeah, you always have to be like water. Yeah, Bruce Lee said you got to be like water. So yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's already a 5-category monster. Now, can he improve the free throws? Now, there's a guy like maybe he does just switch hands and all of a sudden he shoots a little better from the free throw line. Obviously, we talked about already, you're going to get the 0 from threes. And who knows? Maybe the turnovers come slightly down as he gets more comfortable in the NBA. It's never going to be a positive, but maybe he gets it down. He was at 3.4 last year. Maybe he gets into the high 2s at least, and it's not quite as bad.
Right. What about what Boston did to him in the playoffs? Do you think that kind of carries over into the season?
I personally think it actually kind of helped him because now he knows what to work on all summer.
Right. That's a good point.
I mean, that's my hope, at least, if I was a Sixers/Simmons fan.
Right. Well, I mean, he is dating a Kardashian, or is he still dating the Kardashian? So I don't know.
Who isn't?
Taken away from him.
I think I had a date with a Kardashian last week.
3-point training from Chris Humphries.
He's draining it from deep. Okay, so speaking of multi-category monsters, I read that Dwight Howard is down to 3% body fat. He's been shooting threes. He wants to get up and down the court because he said, and this is a quote, "In this league, you have to evolve or die." Craig, is Dwight Howard evolving?
Oh, I'm sorry, mate. You lost me on the question. I got bored when you said Dwight Howard. No, I'm kind of done with Dwight Howard these days. I don't know. Bored probably is the word. He still has a place and he still has a role, doesn't he? In fact, there becomes a point in your draft where you've got to take him if he's still there, if it gets late enough. But I can't remember the last time I owned Dwight Howard, and it won't be. I'm not interested in his body fat. I'm not really interested in where he plays anymore, to be honest. So just count me out on Dwight Howard, to be honest with you.
Is that a consensus?
If he was just willing to play like Capella or Gobert and rim roll, it'd be fine. But if I have to watch him do one more hopeless post up again, I'm just gonna lose it.
Hey, so your boy Jaylen Brown, the next Leonard, who I don't know. I'm starting to lean towards your camp on that one, but he's guaranteeing that the Celtics are going to make it to the finals. Is Jaylen Brown right? Or is he crazy to be making guarantees before the season even starts?
I think he's right. Yeah, I think they have the best team with the best coach, and I know you guys are very high on Toronto. So obviously, I mean, you guys know where I stand on Kawhi, so that definitely influences the year. But I think putting my objective hat on, say Kawhi is fully healthy and he's playing, I still think Boston takes him. Yeah, I do. I just think there's just too much talent, too much versatility, and they have the obvious coaching advantage. So yeah, I think Jaylen Brown's right.
Yeah, I think Stevens said the other day we have 8 starters on this team, and he's not wrong, right? If you count them up.
I mean, if you look at the Eastern Conference, there's some chance they have 4 or 5 All-Stars just because. I mean, how many guys in the East are locks to make the All-Star game? 4, 5? It's not many. And if the team does that well, you could see Kyrie, Horford, and 2 of the wings at least make it. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Isn't that's now it's become a story in itself, the kind of Toronto versus Boston argument. I'm with you, Fizz. Boston, I think Kawhi does improve Toronto, but Boston are the team. And, we marvelled at the bench that Toronto had last year, but it's the same for Boston, the depth and the quality that they have. And they're still growing as a team. Kyrie Irving's still young, for goodness sake. But, you look at guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, not just them. Look at other guys on the bench. Gershon Yabusele. There's a lot of young guys that are still getting better as basketball players, that are in the perfect position to learn and perfect position to get better. But for me, it's going to be just the wing matchups. It's just going to be fascinating, isn't it? When you look at the Boston wings going at it with the Toronto wings. I can't wait, to be honest.
It's almost like they got so much talent that no one ever talks about Horford anymore at all. Like, you forget you have Al Horford on that team too, who was a huge fantasy player last season. I mean, is Horford's value? How's Horford's value going to be affected this year, son? What do you think?
I think it actually increases. I think where did I put it? I had the splits with him with Kyrie on and off. I'm trying to find it off, but basically, his splits with and without Kyrie, he was significantly better with Kyrie. Just field goal percentage, assists, rebounds, like everything. So, I think his issue a lot of times last year was like he had to become the man, and they were trying to facilitate all the offense through him. That's not where he's best, so he's best in like a complementary role, getting the high post or, at the top of the key. And when there's other guys moving and cutting and things like that, I think that's when he's most effective. So I think, the infusion of talent and the development of the young guys is going to really benefit him.
Yeah, the assist that he gives you from a center position, I mean, it's like having a point guard at center. You can almost avoid taking a guard if you take him. So I guess the last thing just for the group, I was looking a couple things. There's been a lot of news out of Houston though. A couple things that concerned me was one that people are saying James Harden looks kind of pudgy, where last offseason they were saying he looked ripped and he goes on and wins the MVP. This year they're saying he looks pudgy. Are we looking at an MVP hangover? And he was in Arizona at a nightclub and his entourage got into a fight. He took the phone from a girl who was recording the fight and threw it up on a roof, is what she said. So it doesn't sound like Harden's as committed to having an MVP season this year as he was last offseason. But the real story is the other guy on the team, Adrian Wojnarowski, was saying that they're saying that Carmelo Anthony may end up coming off the bench. What's going on in Houston? Is any of this concern you about taking Harden at the top of a draft? Is Carmelo Anthony, is he you just avoid him completely? What do you think's going on there? Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll take it. I've been talking about Houston from a macro sense from the very beginning. And, from that perspective, I love Carmelo being on the team because I think they're going to have to run and gun with him. Carmelo individually, specifically, I mean, it really comes down to his ADP, right? Like, I hate him. Like, I just, he's never on my team. But
tell us how you feel.
Everybody has a price, right? Everyone has a price. So if he's cheap enough, I have no problem taking him because, like, that environment doesn't get any better, right? And they're not gonna. Harden and Chris Paul are not gonna allow him to be ball stoppers, right? Chris Paul has no problem getting in your face and telling you what to do. So from that, that perspective, like I don't have an issue with that. And, so if he does, actually catch and shoot rather than catch and then wait for the defender to come so he can jab and whatever, and then jack up some crazy stupid shot. I mean, he's going to have a ton of open looks. So as a specialist, whether it be like a 3-point and point specialist, if he's cheap enough, I have no problem taking him.
How much does he hurt Eric Gordon's value this year?
None whatsoever.
Viz, what do you think? Is Harden, these news stories about Harden, is he still a top pick for you no matter what?
Yeah, I mean, we're still 2 months away from the season even starting. I'm not overly concerned about Harden. We talked about last time how I feel about Houston's team, that the offseason was just really bad for them in general, drops them down to the second tier behind Golden State now. As for Carmelo, I mean, Son is right. He's going from pretty much the best situation possible to arguably the worst, from arguably the worst last year in OKC. Just the amount of guys who've really struggled playing with Russ is growing by the year. So, maybe we see a slight resurgence back up, but I mean, I certainly won't be targeting him. Is there some chance I could see in the last round or two, if he's still there, maybe taking a shot? It's possible, but I assume that he's going to go higher solely based on his name, so I'll be avoiding him more than likely.
Somebody who left the draft early is going to auto-draft him just because he was auto-ranked higher.
I can't wait. Like Yahoo or ESPN, someone's going to be ranked like the top 100. He's going to be in the top 100 or something crazy. It always happens.
For sure. Craig,
Just going
any
back to
opinion?
Harden.
Yeah.
Just going back to Harden a second.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking of, worrying about, well, Carmelo's going to come in and he's going to take more shots and stuff like that. I mean, this Houston, Mike D'Antoni's not going to allow him to play the Carmelo isolation, boring basketball to start with. Like Fizz said, it's going to be run and gun, tons of open looks. But Harden put up huge numbers with a much worse team under JB Bickerstaff. I just can't see how there can be any concerns at all for a player that almost does what he wants on the court at times at will. So I don't think you can, I think it takes something really drastic to knock down the value of James Harden, even in that elite top tier. And I just, Carmelo Anthony isn't the guy that's going to be doing that for me.
Another thing to keep in mind is that James Harden did go to Arizona State University, so the dude knows how to party. He's a professional. He learned how, even though it was for a year. The guy knows how to party. I went to Arizona State. I can give you firsthand accounts. The Sun Devils. I think we were in Playboy's top 5 of top party schools for years when Playboy was still a thing. Florida State, Arizona State. What's that, Craig?
Good little run last year, didn't they? But
they did.
Tiny.
Yeah,
with Bobby Hurley. Bobby Hurley is the head coach. Yeah.
They got smashed, but they could run and gun with the best of them with their small lineup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they're not getting top pick of talent when you have U of A an hour and a half away. But who knows? Maybe now with what went on with the FBI and everything, they could be coming up to ASU. Bobby Hurley's hands are clean. That's as far as I know. Yeah.
Well, Hurley's a great coach, isn't he? Great coach, Hurley.
Yeah. Well, he comes from a great system.
Before he went to Arizona State, he was coaching University of Buffalo, which is where I am, and he built that program. He was, yeah. Now his brother's, I forget where his brother is. His assistant, thankfully, stayed with UB, and they made the tournament. Obviously, beat Arizona this year, but his brothers went to UConn. I forgot about that. But yeah, I see no reason to worry about Harden, as none of us seem to do.
Well, I think we're coming up on our hour mark here, or we might be slightly over. Any final words, guys, before we wrap this one up? I know we'll be coming back same time next week.
Yeah, no, it's always a pleasure, to talk Goose with you. We'll definitely make this. We're doing it every Tuesday, right? Is that what's going on?
Yep. And it should be up. Yeah. And it'll post Thursday morning, Fizz, or?
Yeah, it should be up. Yeah, before when you wake up on Thursday. Maybe not for Craig, but early in the morning at least for Craig on Thursday. And when we wake up here, and I'm excited to talk about 26 through 50 because I can already see us talking about DeAndre Ayton for quite a while next week. Based on where Sun has a.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Sorry to cut you off, Viz. One thing I've been kind of thinking about, like a 32-team dynasty league. I'm going through like some rules and regulations and contracts and things like that. Is that something that you guys would be interested in? And I guess if anybody's listening, let us know if that's something you're interested in. And I think over this year, I tried to get something going and try to gauge interest. And, if we have enough guys, I'll try to set something up for next year. What are you guys' thoughts on?
Yeah, I remember, when JB was doing basketball, they had the 20-man dynasty league for a while, and I assume people would be willing to do that again. Yeah. I've never done a league that deep, but I'd be willing to try it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'd be in for sure. I know Craig would be in.
Yeah, I feel like Craig would have a.
Craig's gonna kick all our butt.
I know.
Craig's like, my team might not be good this year, but I'm ready for 2025 for sure. I got a 7th grader that is gonna kill.
What are you saying? Is that I like hot young guys?
No.
There's a guy in one of my baseball leagues. He took Bryce Harper when he was like 13 and smashed him forever. He's like, I don't even know, man. It's crazy.
That's
information age.
That's I'll take LeBron James Jr. right now.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Man, I'm excited. I just don't know why I just thought of this, but that Duke team next season, holy cow. I know we're not a college basketball podcast, but that Zion Williamson is exciting,
all freshmen,
man.
All freshmen, it's still got to click for them. There's some good, don't rule out Nevada, don't rule out Gonzaga, some really good teams with some really good experienced players. The freshmen don't always work.
I'm not saying they're going to win anything. I just can't wait to watch them.
Super talented, yeah. You can't argue with that.
Man.
I got a question for you guys here. All right. So, Mike Krzyzewski, is known as arguably one of the greatest college coaches of all time, right? But over the last 10 years, he's had, some of the greatest recruiting classes of all time, but all those teams have really not done much.
Yeah.
Calipari's done better. I don't think he's a great in-game coach, personally.
I've got an argument for this, and do you not think that the best coaches now are limited in really being able to do their job to the maximum of their abilities because of the CARA rules? So, the players can only train so many hours a week. They're not allowed to train during, holiday periods and stuff like that. And it really limits the, especially with low IQ basketball, low IQ freshmen anyway, really limits the kind of impact that you can have.
Right. So you're saying the teams with the juniors and seniors, because they have more cohesion and more practice time, that negates any of the talent?
Exactly that. That transition going to a brand new team with a brand new system, it's tough as a freshman. Obviously there are a lot of super talented, but you take a side like Gonzaga, for example, and they're going to have, Killian Tilly and Rui, who have been there multiple years, both fantastic, potential lottery picks in the draft next year as more experienced guys. But they've played in that system for 2, 3, 4 years. Whereas the freshmen coming in, they're not allowed to train over the holiday periods. They're going to come into a brand new system, brand new team, and they're going to be limited on how they practice, how often they practice, what they're allowed to do physically.
Well, that's my theory. Here's the counter argument to that, though, right? Calipari's done all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, but a lot of that comes down. You look at the personnel that the successful Kentucky sides have had. You look at the personnel and the high IQ of the team. That someone like Willie Cauley-Stein, for example. He might not have been the most talented player on the team, but he was on that great Kentucky team. But you're talking about a guy who was so high IQ at the college game and could guard multiple positions. There are certain
he
guys
stood out over Towns.
Sorry?
He stood out over Towns. Weren't they there together? So
who?
Cauley-Stein and Towns? Yeah.
Same as Cauley-Stein stayed for an extra year as well, didn't he? He left after his sophomore year.
Yeah.
But I think that there's certain players that lend themselves to just get it and just be able to do it and have the skill sets to be able to do it. But I think
I hear you.
When you're saying about Coach K, for example, how much of his job could he do so much better if he was actually allowed to do it on a much more full-time? But obviously it's a full-time job. But in terms of the actual coaching side of it, how much better would Duke be next year with all that talent if they were able to actually train like a pro?
Wouldn't you think he'd want to turn Duke into like a Gonzaga or a Villanova or something? He wants Duke to be this 5 one and done starting freshman guy. He wants to be one of those teams.
Comes out the money.
Yeah. How much they have to pay out to these players?
It's not going to happen, is it? If you want the best players, the most talented athletes, you've got to resign yourself to the fact you're going to lose them.
That's true. I'm not sitting here going I can't wait to watch Nevada next season.
Exactly. People are paying tickets, to watch, Bion Williamson,
Yeah.
That's great. But Duke gets really smart guys, and they get high IQ basketball guys. That's what I don't understand.
Of course.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they have Tatums.
Of course. Yeah. But you've still got that transition period, haven't you, going into a brand new team where they're still going to, the coaching opportunities are much more limited than what they should be. And it's really hypocritical because the NCAA run it almost as a professional organisation where they, make millions and millions of dollars, but they want to treat the athletes as though they're amateurs. But
it's wrong.
We could go 3 hours on that.
We get more college basketball on British television than we do NBA. We might have during the season 2 games a night on average of college basketball every single night. Saturday, we'll have it running from 6 in the evening till 6 in the morning. But it's on that scale where it's global, but they're treating the athletes like amateurs, but making millions off the back.
I don't know anyone who doesn't think they shouldn't be paid.
Exactly. If you're going to treat it like a global, organization, a global event, then at least allow the athletes at least to train and, be allowed to train as though they're pro athletes as well.
For sure.
Yeah. Maybe it'll be different. My quick thought was maybe it'll be different this year or after this year because Duke's class is just so stacked. But it's kind of amazing to me how Coach K, doesn't get anywhere near the shit that Calipari does for getting all these one and done guys over and over again now. Yeah, it's changed so much in the last 5 years to where they've gotten, Kyrie and Tatum and Bagley and Jabari. You can go on. And Calipari gets all this shit, and Coach K's managed to not get it. I think that is about to change, though. But like you said, he's adjusting to the times, man. If you want the top guys are only going to be there for 1 year. Maybe that changes with the rule changes as they're talking about to go back where you can enter the draft right out of high school. But
please,
who knows? Maybe it won't. I don't know. That's
Coach K.
Said, we could talk about this forever.
Coach K's got himself into one of those untouchable zones though, where he could be on tape having sex with a stripper, with his wife watching, handing a dude half a bag with $500,000 in it to come play at Duke, and they just be like, "Oh, that's just classic Coach K getting things done," where other people are going to be dragged out to the square and hung. So I don't know. He gets a pass somehow on that stuff, but. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get us off onto a whole college basketball thing. I just
no, it's all right.
Man, I watched those highlights on of Zion and stuff, and I'm like, damn, I can't wait to see that guy in college and then the pros. But yeah, so we'll kind of probably keep the same type of format going each and every week. We'll try to keep a consistent day that we drop all these podcasts. So leave your comments for us. Share it on your social media, share it on your Facebook page, pass it around to your friends if you like hearing us, bring people to Razzball. We love doing what we do. We want everyone to see it. And if you're already reading it and listening to us, it's the best place to come for all your fantasy sports stuff. I've been personally a Razzball fan for, maybe 10 years at least. And it's gets better and better every year. So really happy to be able to host this podcast with these guys. We got Sun, Viz, Craig. Keep an eye out for their articles. They're going to be up all the time this off season, then regularly during the season. Sun's going to be dropping his rankings on us. All the tiers, all the rankings, everything you need for your fantasy basketball draft. Last chance. Any parting words, or should we wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up.
All right.
Go for it, dude.
I'm just look forward to getting back together next week. And like I said, try to keep this going Thursday morning. And as Brent said, any comments that you have, reach out to one of us on Twitter or the comment section at basketball.razzball.com. Find the post. It'll be right near the top. And let us know what you would change, what you really liked, you want us to keep, all that good stuff. It definitely helps.
Yeah, we obviously listen to all your suggestions. So totally. Yeah. Great. So drop it in the comment box and we'll take a look at it. So thank you guys for listening. We'll wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Basketball Podcast with Razzball, and we'll see you next week.